It's been a while, but we're back on the football side of things. Quick question for you guys though. Let me know down below in the comments, 1, who your favorite NFL team is, and 2, what are your expectations for them this season, good or bad? Maybe throw in a bold prediction or two. We still have a long way to go, right? So why not get crazy now? But we have some news to get into first, most notably, Bradley Beal is on his way to Phoenix, and then we're going to get into my divisional predictions, where teams will finish in their division, and then based off of those, and based off of a tier system that I have, where all 32 teams will finish this season. Don't worry, good or bad, we're going to talk about each and every NFL team on today's show. A quick little preview here going into next season. But this is your early reminder to support us. We're on the road to 500 subs on the channel, and we can't get there without you guys. 4 videos a week, 2 fantasy, 2 podcasts. We're grinding over here, right? Support us on the road to 500 subs. A crazy milestone. I can't believe we're even close to approaching. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's get into some news. The verdict is out. We're going to start here with Ja Morant, as he was suspended 25 games to start the next NBA season. I did some research. Over the last 2 seasons, the Grizzlies are 33-17 without Ja Morant on the court, right? And that is including the playoffs from this previous year. But they were 21-7 in 2022, and they were 12-10 in 2023. We've talked about this plenty here on the channel. When Bakari was here, we were talking about this situation a lot. So if you missed it, go check out previous podcast. But the one thing I will say is I liked how Adam Silver waited for Denver to get their shine, waited for their parade to be over to go ahead and give this announcement to give Denver their shine, right? But I know we don't know the schedules, right? As of right now, we're still, 4 or 5 months away. But let me know down in the comments, in a hypothetical world, what is the Grizzlies' record, right, out of their first 25 games? They win almost double the amount that they lose without Ja Morant. What is the record in the first 25 before Ja can return to the court? But the Beal is sunny, right? Breaking news yesterday, or it might have been 2 days ago, regardless, the Washington Wizards, they traded All-Star, 3-time All-Star Bradley Beal to the Phoenix Suns for Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, a handful of second-round picks, and multiple pick swaps per Woj, per Shams, per everybody, right? But Kevin Durant, he was traded to Phoenix last season, and in an interview, I believe a couple years ago, he spoke very highly of Bradley Beal. He said he's a Hall of Fame All-Star player. Calling him just a scorer is diminishing to who Bradley Beal really is on the basketball court. But for Phoenix, we're going to look at their side. We'll dive into Washington's side, and we're going to give out some grades here. As for Phoenix, I believe it's really like an A-, B+ type of move, because on the plus side, you have 3 walking buckets, right? There's 81 points combined per game last season between the trio of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal. 2 years ago, Bradley Beal was the guy who averaged 36 a game, right? 34, I believe, the year before that. So this team has 3 guys who can really create their own shot and single-handedly win you a basketball game, right? But another positive is that it's early in the offseason, right? So they have a lot of time to mesh on the court or off the court, right? Whether if it's an open runs or just hanging out off the court, the trio has some time to mesh, right? They also have some time to address the depth and the defensive questions here in free agency, whether if that's moving DeAndre Ayton or whether if that's just signing a lot of vet minimums, guys like Jeff Green, guys like that who are older but can still produce at least a little bit here for championship level teams. But the negatives here for Phoenix is that they now have to pay that contract for Bradley Beal. Prior to last season, Bradley Beal signed a 5-year, $251 million extension with the Washington Wizards. And now that $50 million a year is with Phoenix, right? So Phoenix is going to have to pay that contract on top of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. They have no cap flexibility, right, to say the least. Their top 4 players alone exceed the cap space. And also, they have to honor the no-trade clause that Bradley Beal does have on his contract. So if Bradley Beal falls off a cliff, let's say, the Phoenix is going to have to honor that no-trade clause. They might not be able to move him. It could be a very sticky situation in a hypothetical world that Bradley Beal does fall off planet Earth, right? But what pieces can this team acquire to help defensively? What can they do with DeAndre Ayton to address their overall depth? especially if they decide to, hey, you know what, let's keep DeAndre Ayton. Maybe Frank Vogel can get something out of him. And maybe let's use whatever vet minimums we have to go out there and fill out the bench. They have some questions they have to answer, but again, like I said, it's early in the offseason. But I saw a move like this, and I started thinking, I was like, how can this move work on the court, right? Because we've seen Kevin Durant with big threes before that haven't really worked out on the court. In my opinion, how this is going to work is Bradley Beal is going to have to embrace that sniper role, right? But still know when it's time to put the ball on the floor and create for himself. His job is going to be the easiest it's ever been here in his career. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, they demand so much attention in that mid-range area that these kickouts are going to come to him, and most times he might be wide open. Bradley Beal doesn't need to be the ball handler on his team. He just needs to move and he needs to make some shots, but still create when the defense and the game plan calls for him to. Maybe if he has a mismatch or, a switch happens, he needs to take advantage when the time is right? But it will be very interesting, though, as Frank Vogel, he doesn't usually coach high-powered offenses. He's a very defensive coach, and the Suns still have a lot of work to do with this roster, like we've said. But depth is key, in my opinion. Bradley Beal, he just needs to be more of a sniper than a creator in this offense for it to work at its highest level, in my opinion. But who knows, right? I'm just a fan sitting here at home. But for Washington, positives for them is that this new regiment is leaving their mark, right? They're committing to a new rebuild, and I believe that is huge for them. We've talked about that this offseason here on the podcast. And this team, they received some draft capital for Bradley Beal. They now have tons of cap space, right, with the Bradley Beal trade, with Kuzma and KP being free agents. That's only going to open up more money. Maybe they have some sign and trades there with KP and Kuzma, but they can also move Chris Paul to a contender for more draft capital, right, even though it'll be a couple second-round picks, maybe an aging player, but Chris Paul can be moved for more draft capital, right? And this team can go out there with the number 8 pick, draft a guy and build around him, or just use that guy as a really nice building block for the future of this team. The negatives, though, for Washington, you're going to suck for a while, right? This is where the rebuild starts, and this new regiment is leaving their mark, right? And I'm happy that Washington is taking this route, but just do this rebuild the right way, right? Rebuild the right way. Don't rush anything. Don't try and get back to mediocrity. Do this rebuild the right way like you did before with John Wall, Bradley Beal. But for Washington, I give them like a B minus. It sucks moving off from Bradley Beal. I'll say B plus, right, in that range. But it sucks moving off of a guy. It's kind of an end of an era because those 2015 to 2017 Washington Wizards teams were so much fun to watch when they were fully healthy. But, it sucks to end an era, right? But it's time, right? It's time to go a different direction. It's both for best routes, right? But MJ sells big. Right? In 2010, Michael Jordan bought the majority share of the Charlotte Bobcats at the time for $275 million. In that time, since then, as the majority owner, he has a 41% win percentage with the team, including the 2011-2012 season, which was one of the worst teams in NBA history, might be the worst in NBA history with the lockout season. But he's had 2 playoff appearances, both in which were first-round exits. Shout out to Kemba Walker, right? He was amazing in that time. But in that time also, some of his notable free agency signings. He signed Cody Zeller to a 4-year, $60 million deal. Nick Batum to a 5-year, $120 million extension. I believe it was an extension. Terry Rozier, a 3-year, $60, and a Gordon Hayward, 4-year, $120 million deal. Right? No big names jump off the mark. When I read those names off, but still, those are some of his notable signings for what it means. But he recently sold the majority share in the Charlotte Hornets for almost $3 billion. He made almost 11 times his investment. And I'll say it. He wasn't necessarily the greatest owner, but he's a dang good businessman. Making 11 times your investment in an NBA team is absolutely insane. MJ, the rich get richer, right? Moving over to just around the NBA, right? The general outlook around what's going on in the NBA. Most notably, Lou Will, he retired recently, and after 17 years, he's a guy who retires with 3 Sixth Man of the Year awards, and as a man with the most bench points in NBA history. Out of the 1,123 regular season games that Lou Will played, he came off the bench in 1,001. So he really only started for about 100 of those games. But regardless, He scored 13,396 total points off the bench in his career, which is 2,117 more than Jamal Crawford, which he is in second place, right? This is a guy who was the 45th pick in the 2005 draft, and out of the 60 players that were taken that year, only Chris Paul scored more points in the NBA than Lou Will, and I believe Chris Paul is the only player in that draft class that is left, aside from Lou Will, who you just retired. And it'll be interesting to see if he's a Hall of Fame level player just because of his impact off of the bench. I believe he could be a guy that gets in, maybe not first ballot, but the third or fourth ballot. Maybe if it's a weak class, Lou Will can find his way into the Hall of Fame. Kyrie Irving, he signs a new shoe deal, or at least it's believed that he will, with Anta. It's also reported that Dallas will be the only bidder for Kyrie this offseason, which is a very interesting report saying that he has connections with LeBron. He has connections maybe out there in LA with the Clippers and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. It'd be very interesting to see if Dallas is really the only bidder for Kyrie. But I guess it makes sense with the off-court drama and the money that Kyrie would demand. Very interesting, right? We'll have to see what happens this offseason. But Chicago, right, the Bulls, their price tag for a trade with Zach LaVine has been announced. They will accept either multiple first-round picks and a young player, or one first-round pick and a high-end player. I think it is time for Chicago to go a different route. It's time to blow this thing up, switch routes, right, so to speak. But if you trade Zach LaVine, you have to commit to this, right? We know the unfortunate things happened with Lonzo Ball. It was a fun couple months when that team was fully healthy. But if you're going to trade Zach LaVine, you have to trade DeMar DeRozan, right? You're going to have to let Vucevic walk or sign and trade him. You're going to have to commit to a rebuild just like the Wizards. But we'll have to see. I think it's more likely that this team runs it back next year and then makes a move than the vice versa of blow it up now and go from there. But the Warriors, they signed their new GM, Mike Dunleavy Jr. He is entering his sixth season with the team in a front office role. He has some connections with an organization. But the biggest thing with Mike Dunleavy is I watched his opening press conference, and one of the first things he was mentioning was we have to bring Draymond back, right? We're interested in bringing him back, but it just has to be for the right money. I'm hoping Draymond returns there in Golden State. It just makes a lot of sense, right? When you look at Draymond, when you think of Draymond, you think Golden State Warriors. But Miami, last bit of news here is that they are still focused on a Dame trade rather than a Bradley Beal trade. And there is a genuine belief inside Miami that Dame will want a change of scenery before the season. But who knows, right? I think at this point in the offseason, unless Dame walks to the front office and demands a trade, I think we all have to kind of stop talking and mocking up different trades for Damian Lillard, because he's at the end of the day, he's most likely not going to want out of Portland. He's already made it this far. Why not finish your career there, right? But moving over to the divisional predictions, right, as we're about 13 minutes in, but we're going to fly through some of these. As the next couple slides you'll see is my divisional predictions, right, and then we're going to get into a tier system, which I'll explain now. So we're going to have 5 different tiers between these NFL teams. We're going to have the Caleb Williams tier, right, which is the top 5, the bottom of the bottom teams, right, the bottom of the barrel. So we're going to have the top 5 pick category. We're going to have the mediocre tier. We're going to have the fringe playoff tier. We're going to have the playoff teams that make the playoffs but aren't contenders, because our last tier is going to be the Super Bowl contenders. Pretty self-explanatory. You guys will see on the top of your screen as we move along. But we're going to start in the AFC. As I have in the AFC North, the Bengals winning the division with Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh following suit. In the AFC South, I have Jacksonville winning that division with Tennessee, Indy, and Houston following suit. In the AFC East, might be a surprise, but I have the Dolphins edging out the Buffalo Bills, maybe in a tiebreaker right late in the season. But I have Miami winning that division, Buffalo right behind them, and the Jets maybe grabbing a playoff spot. But New England there in 4. In the AFC West, no surprise, Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. As long as Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid are together, they will be my favorite in the AFC West. The Chargers, Denver, and Las Vegas in that order follow suit. In the NFC side of things, in the NFC North, it's time. It's time, Detroit, right? As a Browns fan, we feel for you guys, and we want to see you guys succeed. But Detroit, they're going to win the NFC North this year. They're going to edge out Minnesota, maybe in a tiebreaker like Miami and Buffalo. But Detroit, I think it's finally their time to win a division. Minnesota is number 2, Chicago 3, and Green Bay 4. In the NFC South, I have New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, and Tampa Bay, which Tampa Bay, it's very surprising to see them that low. I mean, Baker can come out and be serviceable, and they could be the winner of the division, right? But I think I would just go a different route. I think I'd bank my money on a different direction in the Saints or Atlanta, for that matter. But the Eagles, again, they were the reigning NFC champs. They're going to win the NFC East here with Dallas and the Giants following suit. Washington, there's some questions about what we'll talk about here in a little bit. And finally, in the NFC West, you see I have the Niners winning that division back-to-back with Seattle, the Rams, and Arizona following suit. But here we go. We're going to move over into the tier system now, as we're going to start here in the bottom 5, the Caleb Williams tier. These are the teams that, as of right now, as of June 20th, I'm predicting to have a top 5 pick in next year's draft to grab one of these franchise-changing quarterbacks. We're going to start here with Indianapolis, as they lost a lot of key players on defense, right? They traded away Stephon Gilmore. They lost Bobby Okereke in free agency. They did add an edge defender in Samson Ebukam, right, coming over from the 49ers, a guy who was very talented last year for San Fran. He should be able to come in and produce for Indy, right? Indy, I mean, they also had a good draft on top of that. Most notably, Josh Downs is coming in from North Carolina. I just, at the end of the day, I think this is going to be a year more so of development than the win column for Indianapolis. It's going to be a year of development for Anthony Richardson, for Josh Downs, for maybe even Jonathan Taylor taking a step up, for the young defensive players they have. I think it's more so about development this year for Indy than the win column. For Houston, they made some okay moves here in this offseason to surround C.J. Stroud, which they drafted with the number 2 overall pick. They brought in Robert Woods. They drafted Nathaniel Tank. Or Nathaniel Dell, right, as others would say. Shaq Mason was brought up to help up front to protect their number 2 overall pick. At the end of the day, DeMeco Ryans is a first-year head coach with a first-year quarterback. I think this Houston team just needs a year or two to, really take that next step, right? But I think they're in a really good spot in their rebuild, and they're doing everything the right way as of right now. But now we're going to move over to the NFC side of things in the bottom 5 with Tampa Bay, the Rams, and Arizona. Stay here before you went to the comment section. But for Tampa Bay, this is my hope for them, right? Because Tom Brady is no longer in town. Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask will likely be the quarterbacks for Tampa in 2023, which both of those guys are okay, right? I'm a Browns fan and a Gators fan. I have connections to both of those guys. I just don't know even that this team has a quality roster, tons of veterans, and the team is set to win right now with Todd Bowles. I just don't know if the quarterback is going to be good enough to get them over that hump. This team also drafted Clyde Cansey, one of the most intriguing players in the NFL draft, as he's drawn comparisons to Aaron Donald, rightfully so, as he trains with him in every single offseason. But he's going to have a great rookie year, I believe. Maybe defensive rookie of the year being next to Vita Vea there in Tampa, as Vita Vea, I mean, every single play he takes up at least 2 blockers. Clyde Cansey's going to have a lot of single assignments, right? One guy to go through instead of 2 like Vita Vea. I think Clyde Cansey can have a really good rookie season for the Tampa Bay Bucks. But like I said, it just comes down to their quarterback play and if it can be good enough. I don't believe so, and that's why I have them as a bottom 5 team. For Arizona, I mean, what hasn't gone wrong for them this offseason? They're coming off of a year they were 4-13. They fired their coach. Their star quarterback had a knee injury. He's going to be out for a substantial amount of time. In free agency, J.J. Watt retired. They lost Zach Allen, Byron Murphy, Marcus Golden, as well as some other talent. 2 other teams in free agency. They then cut DeAndre Hopkins, one of the premier wide receivers in the league. A lot has gone wrong for Arizona this offseason. But on the plus side, I mean, they did bring in Kazir White, a very talented linebacker from Philadelphia. They did draft B.J. Ojolari, which, like I said, those pickups are small, but they're positives, right? They're in the right direction. But just overall, with this team being very depleted, they have a first-year head coach, tons of questions at quarterback, and when Kyler Murray will be back on the field. This is a team that could be in the running for Caleb Williams, even though I like Kyler Murray. But I believe with the new regime at the head coaching spot, this team might not be shy to, in the offseason, go out there and draft Caleb Williams to trade away Kyler Murray like they did with Josh Rosen. And then finally here with the Rams. Again, this is only my hope for them, just like Tampa. So before you run at the comments section, know that this is just my hope for the Los Angeles Rams, as they have been just as aggressive tearing this team down as they were building it up to win that Super Bowl, which is a good thing, right? Because they did trade away Jalen Ramsey for a very inexperienced tight end in Hunter Long, as well as the draft pick. I know that was to honor Jalen Ramsey, but they still didn't get back the value for a player like Jalen Ramsey that we would expect. This team went out there this offseason. They drafted 14 they drafted 14 players. They brought in another 26 undrafted guys through this entire offseason. They have officially embraced the rebuild in my mind. But the only thing that scares me with the Rams, right, is because they have Matt Stafford, they have Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, and not to mention Sean McVay, one of the best coaches here in the NFL. Are those four going to be good enough to take this team over the top and maybe flirt with the playoff spots? I believe if that was the case, I believe that's a mistake, especially because you have the opportunity to tank and pair a great football mind in Sean McVay with a Caleb Williams, right? You have the opportunity to get another young guy in here to succeed, to be the successor for Matt Stafford, and he can still pair along with Cooper Kupp, with Sean McVay for years to come. For the Rams, again, it's my hope, maybe not so my prediction, but my hope for them going forward. Moving over to the mediocre / a year away tier, and we're going to start in the NFC side of things, move over to the AFC. Hopefully it's starting to make some sense now. But Carolina, they are one of the hardest teams to rank, in my opinion. They have a much improved coaching staff. They traded for the number one pick, which they picked Bryce Young, and Bryce Young gets set to start from day one, no surprise. But they most notably added Adam Thielen, Miles Sanders, Von Bell. They have some key additions to their team this offseason, and I can see anywhere from a 6 to 10 win season in their division. But I'm more focused on the development than the win column this year if I'm Carolina. Moving over to Washington. They haven't been able to find that guy at the quarterback position. You know, they tried to trade for Deshaun Watson, and that didn't work out. And now they are set to start Sam Howell, who he only has one game of NFL experience, so that's going to be a question in itself. But this team also did bring in Jacoby Brissett. I will say, as a Browns fan, a very promising guy, right? I think he can do just enough to win you a couple games here in 2023. This team also addressed their offensive line in free agency and the draft, right, as well as some defensive needs. Most notably, the 16th pick where they drafted Emmanuel Forbes, a very promising corner. They're out of Mississippi State, if I'm not mistaken. I'm probably very wrong on that. But they have tons of talent. This year it's going to come down to two things. Can Chase Young stay healthy? Can he stay healthy, be the number two pick that he was once just a couple years ago? And can Sam Howell be an above-average quarterback to win them the games that they need? If not, can Jacoby Brissett do the job? For Chicago, I think they're in a really good spot right now, regardless of how they play this year. They signed Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, two defensive linemen, which is going to be huge for their front seven, which was a part of a defense that was the worst in the league last season. This Bears team still has the most money in the NFL, so they could still go out there. You know, can you imagine Diop coming over to this Bears team? That would be insane. I don't even think there's a connection right now between the two. But this team still brought in a bunch of key pieces. They still have the most money in the league, and they have a quarterback looking to take a superstardom leap. And, I mean, he has the keys to do it. You know, Nate Davis was also brought in to help up front in the offensive line, to help Justin Fields from not dying in the pocket. They traded for DJ Moore with that number one pick. And I don't know if he's going to have necessarily a huge year numbers-wise, but I think his impact will be more impactful than his numbers this coming year. I can also see a team that's just overall better, and with showing tons of promise going into the future. But they might just be a year away. You know, they might just lose a couple games off of key mistakes, and they might just miss the playoffs just off of small things, right? But I think overall it will be a better team this year. Might just not show so much in the win column. And finally here with Green Bay staying in the NFC North, as the question here is, how much do you believe in Jordan Love? You know, this team traded away Aaron Rodgers, and they also lost a ton of offensive weapons, but they've also added Luke Van Ness in the draft. They've added Jaden Reed to help out that wide receiver room, just to name a couple guys here, most notably in the offseason. But I believe in Jordan Love personally. And to me, you can't expect him to be Aaron Rodgers this year, just like you couldn't expect Aaron Rodgers to be Brett Favre after Rodgers took over. These guys are going to need a year or two, right, to come into their own, to really find out who they are as a pro quarterback. So mediocrity, I believe, is most likely what's going to happen for Green Bay this year. They have, some veteran pieces there where they're going to be decent, just not elite, right? They're not even above average. They're just going to be here stuck in the middle of the road, stuck in purgatory until Jordan Love can figure out who he is as a quarterback here in the NFL. Moving over to the AFC side of things, we'll start with Tennessee. What is their deal at quarterback, right? They traded for and they added Will Levis to this quarterback room, which that's going to be a question I think this team is going to have to monitor every single week, all season, which I guess, it's not a bad thing to have options, right? But at the quarterback position, you kind of want stability. You don't want the guys in the locker room thinking, who's going to be the guy, who's going to be the leader this week, right? But hey, at the end of the day, Will Levis might be Tannehill's successor, whether if it's this year, next year, or the year after. This Tennessee team also added 2 offensive tackles. They added Andre Dillard. They added Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern, who Peter Skoronski can also slide inside. So this team, I think they lost Taylor Lewan, but they also brought in 2 guys that are better than Lewan as of right now. So this team is in a pretty good spot offensively. Defensively, they still have Jeffrey Simmons, Kevin Byard. This team is in a really good spot. They have one of the best coaches in the league, Mike Vrabel. He's too good of a coach to tank. So who knows? Maybe they come out this year, prove me wrong yet again, and win the division. But as of right now, I would go a different route. Like you guys saw it earlier, I would have Jacksonville edging them out for the division. For New England, biggest question for me this year for them is this Bill Belichick's last year? Mac Jones, he's entering yet another year. He's looking to take a step back up, right? Maybe get back into the Pro Bowl status of a quarterback. But this team lost Jacoby Myers. They added Juju Smith, right? So it's kind of an even kill there, even exchange. The biggest addition this year for New England in this offseason was Christian Gonzalez, a guy who fell all the way to 16. Some people had him going as high as 6 to the Detroit Lions. He fell all the way to 16 right into the laps of Bill Belichick and this amazing defense that they're building, which I also want to say, if by chance the same supporter is watching that he was a couple months ago when we did our first set of predictions, he predicted that. He predicted that Christian Gonzalez would fall to 16 and he would fit in with New England. That's crazy that it ended up coming true. So shout out to him if he's still listening. But this team, they changed a little bit offensively. As they changed around their coordinators, let their defensive coordinator be a defensive coordinator. He doesn't have to call plays like a defensive coordinator. They brought back Bill O'Brien to this offense. It should be, a better offense this year, right? No doubt, as it's kind of hard to beat last year. But I think this year for New England, is it Bill Belichick's last year? And is it going to be the year of Ramondre Stevenson? I think those are the 2 things that we're going to have to look out for because we know this defense is going to be great, right? It's just a matter of can the offense put it together. Moving over to our third tier, right? The fringe playoff teams. We have our AFC teams here. We have 4 of them. Let's get into it. As for Cleveland, I'm a Browns fan. It hurt me to leave them out the playoffs. But what version of Deshaun Watson are we going to get? We added Zadarius Smith for pennies on a dollar this offseason. We added Dalvin Tomlinson, Juan Thornhill, Okoronkwo from the Texans to this defense. All of those were much needed pieces as our defense year in and year out has been a struggle to watch, right, as a Browns fan. But offensively, we added Elijah Moore. We added Cedric Tillman. Maybe we can still add DeAndre Hopkins to this offense, though it seems slim right now. But, Elijah Moore has gotten nothing but praise this entire offseason. Some reporters have said he looks like the best receiver in the entire offense, which is, I wouldn't go that far because we do still have Amari Cooper. But it's awesome to hear that a guy is taking strides in the right direction. And, if he's that much improved, this offense is only going to be that much better. But regardless, we still have one of the most talented teams in the league with a coach that has something to prove, right? I think Kevin Stefanski's on the hot seat this year, and he's going to have to come out and be better than he ever has. This is a team that we're not going to have to wait 11 games for an elite quarterback to step in and take over, right? Because let's not forget, Deshaun Watson, when he was playing with Houston, was once considered a top 5 guy in the league for a couple seasons. And that was not too long ago, right? So this year he's going to be able to start from day one. We're still a team that has Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, 2 of the best players we have in the NFL. Can we all as a unit get hungry enough and put it all together at the same time to win some games, to win 10+? Because we're going to need to win 10+ here in our division to be a playoff team because our division is maybe the best in the league here in the AFC North. But speaking of the AFC North, we are going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. And though I don't like to listen to this guy as much anymore as I used to, but Colin Cowherd, I saw a clip, and he's been saying this entire offseason, right? So it's unfortunately true to say, but his point with the Pittsburgh Steelers is that when TJ Watt plays, Pittsburgh wins, right? And I think, I could have noticed that. Anybody could have noticed that, but it's just the fact of hearing it, right? Sometimes you just got to hear it to believe it. But this team is 8-2. This team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they were 8-2 when T.J. Watt played last year. They were 17-7 over the last 2 years when T.J. Watt has played. He changes quite literally everything for them. He might be the best pass rusher here in the NFL. This team went out there and drafted Broderick Jones. They drafted Joey Porter, which he has a bloodline here with the Steelers with his father. Both of those guys should have immediate impacts. Kenny Pickett, he's a guy who's going to look to take another jump this year. And to be honest, I'm also a big fan of Najee Harris as far as fantasy football. And in order for him to be fantasy relevant, he's going to need to take a jump up like he did he's going to have to have a year similar to his rookie year for this team to be better, right? To maybe be in this position to make the playoffs. Not to mention, they might have the best coach in the league in Mike Tomlin. Moving over to the Denver Broncos, and I believe in Sean Payton. I believe in the Denver Broncos. I believe in Russell Wilson's can have a resurgence. I believe in this team going forward. Russ is coming off of his worst career year, if not pretty close to it. But Sean Payton, to me, can salvage this. Let's take a trip down memory lane. Right? Sean Payton took a position in New Orleans, and he's looking around the league. And my favorite player of all time was a guy who looked like a below-average quarterback with big turnover issues, and that guy was playing in San Diego. That guy was later traded to New Orleans with Sean Payton, and he would go on to set many records as a quarterback. He won a Super Bowl, had many great playoff runs, and he became one of the best all time, for sure a future Hall of Famer. That guy goes by the name of Drew Brees, right? He was salvaged by Sean Payton. Big credit to Drew Brees because the talent was there. He just needed the right position. But Sean Payton helped salvage him and make him a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I believe that Sean Payton can do the same for Russell Wilson. Now, look, I'll say this. Russell Wilson might already be a Hall of Fame type of player, but I think Sean Payton can have a similar impact on Russ where he can get back to being comfortable, help Russ get back to be comfortable on the field and be effective like we know Russ can be in his whole entire career. But the first thing Sean Payton did when he stepped in the door in Denver, he addressed the offensive line. He helped his quarterback not have to worry about dying on each and every snap. He brought in Mike McGlinchey, one of the best offensive linemen from the 49ers. So there's going to be an improved O-line, an experienced coach, an offense with tons of weapons and tons of untapped potential. I can see a route where Denver makes the playoffs, especially with the mile-high advantage. But the Jets, they went all in this offseason. They went in and they traded for Aaron Rodgers, as well as they brought in Alan Lazard. They brought in McCole Hardman. So this team has Aaron Rodgers now quarterback with a loaded offense. Not to mention, they have Garrett Wilson, right? Garrett Wilson's the best receiver in this offense far and away, and he might be looking to take a superstardom leap in his second year here in the NFL. This team signed and drafted some additional offensive linemen. Robert Saleh is a great head coach. Can they all put it together, right? Can they put it all together in their tough division because they're not going to have a lot of room for error. I think week 1 might tell us a lot about this team against the Buffalo Bills. But the fringe playoff teams in the NFC is the New York Giants and the Atlanta Falcons. For the Giants, can they take another step? Can Brian Daboll build off of last year? This team added Deontay Banks to help out this defense. There's now a cornerback duo there in New York, if I can talk, with Adoree Jackson, with Deontay Banks. Very dangerous going forward. Tons of speed there in New York. But they have to figure out the Saquon situation. There's no doubt to me that they will, and Saquon will be back in the New York Giant uniform next season. I think Daboll just keeps this team competing, and they're right there on the fringe of a playoff spot. But for Atlanta, they're growing on me, right? And especially because of their division. But let's start with that. They drafted a running back with the 8th pick. I know it sounds crazy, but that guy goes by the name of Bijan Robinson. If you followed the channel this entire year or this entire offseason, you know I'm a big fan of Bijan Robinson. They added a lot defensively as well, most notably Calais Campbell and Jesse Bates, right? One of the best safeties here in the NFL. This team still has Kyle Pitts, who has tons of untapped potential. We haven't seen anything from Kyle Pitts here in his first 2 years, at least that we would have expected. But I just have questions with Arthur Smith, right? Can his scheme transition to wins, year in and year out? And Desmond Ridder, is Desmond Ridder going to be the guy here for Atlanta to win a lot of games? Those are the two most important positions on any football team, and there's a lot of questions there for Atlanta. I just need to see more this year, right? And even with that said, even with my questions with this Atlanta team, they're still a fringe playoff team for me. They're rising up the rankings. Moving over to the playoff teams in the NFC, As you see, I have New Orleans, I believe, and Detroit being my winners here for the divisions, with my wild card being the Dallas Cowboys, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Minnesota Vikings. We'll start here with New Orleans, the Derek Carr effect. I mean, they paid Derek Carr, and this year, I mean, they're going to have Michael Thomas for 4 games because we know he gets hurt. They're going to have Chris Olave looking to take another step, as well as Kamara and Kendre Miller, which is a running back that I think is very underrated, at least as far as a duo. This team did lose Marcus Davenport on the defensive side, but they also brought in Brian Brees, maybe as his successor, right on the defensive end position. I'm just not sold on Dennis Allen, but given that this team has veteranship, they have experience, they're in a younger division, right? I think New Orleans can maybe get the slight edge and win this division maybe by a tiebreaker. Maybe they're 10-7, or maybe they're 11-6, and they can edge out in this scenario in Atlanta Falcons here in like a Week 17 game, right? But for Dallas, they have plenty of highs and lows over this past offseason. They let go of Zeke a long time back there in Dallas, and they're committing to Tony Pollard this year. You know, they added Brandon Cooks to the offense, right? So they've had some highs, some lows. And last year, I mean, the biggest thing with Dallas is that they struggled to stop the run. That was big in their games, especially against Philadelphia. But they went out there and they drafted Mozzie Smith, a guy who should help up front out of Michigan, should be a big help. They're paired next to Micah Parsons and other guys they have on the defensive line, like DeMarcus Lawrence. Is this the year for Dallas, right? Can Dallas finally put it together? I think we're going to see a different side of Dak, too. A weird thing tells me Dak's going to have a much improved year. But who knows, right? I could be delusional. Minnesota is another team here, and they had a very underwhelming offseason. They lost their 4 starting cornerbacks. They lost Dalvin Tomlinson, and they had to cut Dalvin Cook for financial reasons. I will say on the plus side, they did add Marcus Davenport from the New Orleans Saints, which is a very solid addition. But, you know, my favorite move from this offseason is for the Minnesota offense, right, is drafting Jordan Addison. You know, if you followed this channel, you know this is my favorite prospect out of this past draft class. I think he makes this offense super dangerous this year. You know, he's going to take doubles away from Justin Jefferson, which if Justin Jefferson has single coverage, I mean, Justin Jefferson might go for 2,500 yards this season, right? As crazy as that sounds. But it should be a very high-powered offense, an offense that you have to expect is going to score a lot of points with how much they lost defensively. But again, if you're a Minnesota fan, you can't expect to go 11-0 at one point in one-score games. So this team is going to have to win a lot more games and not have to win them at the very last minute. Or maybe they can do that, right? Maybe they can have a repeat of last year. But I think it is an offense that is more dangerous than last year, and an offense that could really shock a lot of people this year and win a lot of games. But at the end of the day, it's really a toss-up for me between Atlanta and Minnesota for this last playoff spot. And finally here, we're going to talk about Seattle. Can they do it again? Right, Geno, he got his contract, he got his money, but can he continue to build off of last year? You know, that will determine everything for the Seattle offense this year. You know, they added Devin Witherspoon, my favorite cornerback here in the draft. The defense is going to be scary. You know, you have Devin Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen making that one of the best defensive cornerback rooms in the NFL right from day one. On offense, they added Jackson Smith and Jigba. They added Zach Charbonnet. The offense has gotten that much better with more offensive weapons. To me, the success of this team solely relies on Geno Smith. And actually, we're going to finish off here with Detroit, as I have them winning the NFC North. But was last year a fluke, right? That is my question for them. Was the second half of last year a fluke? They lost Jeff Okudah in this offseason. I'm not sure that was really a bad thing, right, as that was probably their biggest loss. They went out there, they drafted Brian Branch, Jahmyr Gibbs, Hendon Hooker, right? So they've added some pieces to this offense that could take them maybe to the next level. They also went out in free agency and added David Montgomery, who could be the starter from day one until Gibbs is ready to take over. They added C.J. Gardner-Johnson, an all-pro corner from last year. He's coming over from Philly, and he's going to have an immediate impact, right? Especially on the contract that they give him. A one-year, $8 million deal for a borderline all-pro guy, kind of insane. Do they have any magic left, is my question for Detroit. Do they have any magic left from the second half of last year? You know, it's going to be a big year, I think, for Dan Campbell and that Detroit Lions team. To finish off my playoff teams before we get into the Super Bowl contenders, I have Baltimore and the Los Angeles Chargers. For Baltimore, how is this new offense going to look, right? They changed their offensive coordinator. It should be more of a pass-focused offense, And they brought in Odell Beckham. They brought in Zay Flowers. They paid their quarterback, right? So we know that Lamar, he's going to be here for 2023. And look, I mean, we know Lamar, when he's on the field and he's playing, he does not lose football games. Yeah, I think he wins like 70 to 80% of his games when he's starting, and when he plays, it's ridiculous to say that Lamar is overrated here in the NFL, because he wins football games, and that's the most important thing. But he got paid, like I said, and he should be on a mission for some playoff success this year. If I'm not mistaken, he hasn't won a playoff game yet in his career. Lamar should be on a mission to do just that here in 2023. But for the Chargers, I think big changes are going to come here if there's no playoff success, especially at the head coaching position. This team blew a 20-point lead in the second half of the wild card round game last year against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had a collapse, right, in typical Charger fashion. But they went out, they added Quentin Johnson to this offense, maybe the best receiver here in the draft class. Justin Herbert, he's only going to get better, right? So this is an offense that has Justin Herbert. They have Austin Eckler, who's on a contract year. They have Quentin Johnson, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, who is solid in his own right. A great O-line. A defense is solid enough, right? This team has all the pieces to go out there and be a very successful team like last year, but can they put it together come playoff time? And can Brandon Staley, is he going to continue to hold them back, right? I believe that's the thing that a lot of Chargers fans are complaining with right now is Brandon Staley, their head coach. Is he going to continue to hold them back from some playoff success? Moving over to my Super Bowl contenders. I have, I believe, 7 teams here that out of 100%, right? Think of it like a pie chart, right? As we go out through these last 2 slides. Think of it as a pie chart, right? Out of 100 total percent to win the Super Bowl, this is how I'm breaking down my percentages of these teams that they have a chance to win it, right? And we're going to start here with Jacksonville as, the question here is Trevor Lawrence everything that we think he can be? Is he going to be able to live up to the potential we have set for Trevor Lawrence? As Doug Peterson came in last year and he changed everything for this team from top to bottom. They went from worst to first in their division, and you can't get much better than that. You can't ask for much more from a first-year head coach with this respective team, right? We know Doug Peterson is a Super Bowl champion there in Philly. But Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he looked like a brand new quarterback under Doug Peterson. He looked a lot more comfortable, and I believe he's only going to improve going into next season. But given that this team should take an overall jump as a unit, they added Calvin Ridley on top of that, and they have a relatively weak division, right? They might be able to prime themselves given their division and given that this team should take an overall jump, they might be able to grab the 1 seed or the 2 seed in the AFC. And if you have home field advantage in the playoffs, that only raises your chances of making something happen, right? Small chance, but it's there, and that's why they have a 0.5% as of right now for me to win it all next year. But for Buffalo, they have a 5% chance tied with Miami, and I believe that time is just ticking for this core, right? They lost Tremaine Edmonds, one of their best defensive players, to the Chicago Bears, and they didn't really replace him, right? But they do still have Matt Milano, who could take a step up. They brought back Jordan Poyer, who looks to finish his career in Buffalo. Those additions always help, right? But they're going to have an even tougher division this year. And though it is unfair to me, right, as just a general fan, I believe throughout the Buffalo media and just the overall media, they're going to put a lot of pressure on Doug McDermott this year. And he might end up being on the hot seat, right? Being one of the best coaches in the league, he might be on the hot seat, as this team just hasn't been able to get over that hump and make it even to the Super Bowl, let alone win it. Like I said, if they don't get it done this year, if they don't win 2 or 3 playoff games, I believe it's going to be a very interesting offseason there in Bills Mafia, and them tables are going to be ready for Doug McDermott walking out of that stadium if he doesn't get it done. But Miami, like I said, they also have a 5% chance. Can Tua return to being Tua that we saw early in last season? That is the question, because we saw a consistent Tua and a Tua that was playing at a high level. Can we get that version of him coming into this season? No doubt, right? They have one of the best offenses in the league. They have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Are those 2 top receivers in the NFL? You tell me, right? Tua, he looked elite at times. Like I said, can we get that consistent version of that better version of Tua Tagovailoa? They have an offensive guru at the head coaching position. Not to mention they might go out there and add Dalvin Cook. They might add DeAndre Hopkins to this offense. This is a team that has the potential to be the most talented in the league. And not to mention, on defense, they went out there this offseason. They did nothing major, right? They went out there and they added Jalen Ramsey, a top 3 cornerback in the NFL. And he's going to go out there and he's going to help a room that desperately needs it there in Miami. They still have Bradley Chubb on that defensive line as well. This team has the talent to make something happen, and that's why I think they're going to win the division, right? And I believe they have a 5% chance to, in the playoffs, make something happen. And last thing here, we're going to move over to a team that has a legitimate, real percent chance to win the Super Bowl, as I'm giving San Francisco a 9.5% chance. Yes, I took that 0.5% chance away to give it to Jacksonville, but the 9.5% for the 49ers, it's really all in respect to Kyle Shanahan. It looks to be Brock Purdy at the helm starting next season at the quarterback position, and this team is in the same spot as last year. They're set to compete. They have the roster to do it. They have the coaching staff to do it. But can they be lucky at the right time as far as health to put it all together and win a Super Bowl? That's the biggest question. Is last year you can argue maybe they beat Philadelphia if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt in the first quarter. Maybe they beat Philadelphia if they don't have Christian McCaffrey taking quarterback snaps. It's all up in the air, right? But can they get healthy at the right time to put it all together and get back to the Super Bowl? And these top 3, right? I'll start here by saying these top 3 are very interchangeable. You see a big gap between 3 and 4 as far as percentages, but it comes down to Philadelphia, Kansas City, and the Cincinnati Bengals. For me, we're going to start here with Philadelphia. They're going to repeat as NFC champions, in my opinion, and as if this team wasn't good enough. They went out there and they added Jalen Carter in the draft, maybe the most talented player in the class. He just had a lot of questions about it, the off-the-field stuff. But sure, they lost Javon Hargrave to the 49ers this offseason, so that hurts, right? But like I said, they went and they added Jalen Carter to easily replace him. Their defensive line is going to be Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, and Jalen Carter. I mean, that is an absolutely insane defensive line. I would hate to have to play them twice a year, which is why I think Dallas is not going to be running the ball much when they play Philadelphia. Neither is the New York Giants. But this offense has returned for yet another go at it. A.J. Brown is turning 26. He's only entering his prime as a receiver. Devontae Smith's only going to be better, right? Former Heisman winner. They went out there and they traded for DeAndre Swift to help the running back room. I mean, not to mention, we're saying all of this stuff. That alone sounds like a Super Bowl team. But they went out there and they didn't add, but they still have an MVP level quarterback, a guy who had the best overall performance in the Super Bowl last season, regardless of if he won or not. But they still have Jalen Hurts at quarterback, right? A top 3, top 5 guy here in the NFL at the position. And I believe, I haven't looked at the ratings, I haven't looked at the odds, but I believe Philly should be Vegas' favorite going into next year. A team that also has 25% of the 25% chance to win it all for me is the Kansas City Chiefs. It's business as usual for them, right? They lost Frank Clark and Orlando Brown, but what does Kansas City do best? They replaced the pieces that they lost. They brought in Jawan Taylor. They brought in Charles Omenihu, right? They still have Andy Reid, and they still have Pat Mahomes. And as long as you have that duo, you're going to be a contender in this league. And that's not even mentioning you have maybe the best tight end of all time in Travis Kelce at your disposal. I do have questions about their wide receiver room going forward, right? As a Gators fan, I want Kadarius Toney to step up and have a huge year, but I don't know if he can stay healthy for the long haul, right? I don't know if he can be focused at the same time as being productive, on and off the field. But at the same time, I think I can go out there, right? With high school level football experience, I think I can go out there and look like a somewhat decent receiver with Pat Mahomes as my quarterback. Like I said, I hope Kadarius Toney has a better year, but I don't know if you can rely on MVS to be your best receiver to win a Super Bowl. And, with that being said, the biggest thing to me was that there hasn't been a repeat Super Bowl champion since 2004 and 2005 with the New England Patriots, right? So, it's been a long time since we've had a repeat champion. And to me, that's why they have a 25% chance instead of a 30% chance, which I'm going to give to the Cincinnati Bengals. I believe it is Cincinnati's year to win it all. And I believe this is Joe Burrow's coming out party, right? If he hasn't done that enough. But this team did lose 2 starting safeties in free agency, right? They lost Jesse Bates and Von Bell. But on the positive side, they added Orlando Brown, essentially completing this offensive line for Joe Burrow. He can be a little bit more comfortable this year in the pocket. But they have the most explosive offense in the league, and it doesn't look like Joe Mixon will be facing any suspension time this upcoming year. So they have a fully healthy and ready to go offense. They have Jamar Chase, who's only going to get better, right, this upcoming year. Not to mention, they have far and away, to me, the second best player in the league, right? We all know Pat Mahomes is the best player in the league. Who's number 2? That's Joe Burrow to me. I've been saying that before last season, right here on this podcast. But I believe Joe Burrow, to me, is the second best player in the league. And anytime you have a player of that caliber, you have a chance to be great. I think it is time, Cincinnati. I think it's time you can get your Super Bowl. And I think, all the stars just align too perfectly, right? So if you just got to worry about staying healthy. And you could be the next Super Bowl champions we have here in the NFL. But that is going to do it for today's show. Again, we ran through some news, especially, most notably, the Bradley Beal to the Phoenix Suns situation. And then we went through our divisional predictions. We went through our tier system where we had 5 different tiers. And again, before you run into the comment section, just know that this is based off of tiers. So, if you see a team with a little bit more percentage of a chance to win the Super Bowl, or if you see a team in the same tier, don't take that as a demotion, right? Just know that they're in the same tier. They're in the same conversation for how well they will be this season. But without further ado, that's going to do it. We'll see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy football content. And we're on the road to 500 subs on the channel. Keep liking the videos, keep subscribing to the channel, sharing the podcast, all that good stuff, as we're pumping out great content here, and we don't plan to stop anytime soon. But without further ado, stay happy, stay healthy. We're out.